In any great horror movie, what you don't see is just as important as what you do. To create a genuinely scary horror baddie is a tough ask and often a real gamble. Plenty of times we've seen movies that build to the impending reveal of the twisted and terrible monster only to be met with a cheap costume or a shonky special effect that deflates everything the makers have built to. Some films err on the side of caution, using their villains sparingly. Others take this to an even greater extreme, never showing their main baddies at all. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 horror movies where the villain is never seen. Number 10. Bird Box. This Sandra Bullock starring Netflix horror remains one of the greatest successes for the streaming service. Bird Box launched with a killer premise that proved irresistible. The film takes place in a particularly grim dystopia wherein mysterious entities provoke instant suicidal feelings in anyone who sets eyes on them. To that end, it's no surprise that we never see the creatures on screen. They're given one hell of a build-up. Even with Netflix cash, it'd be a tall order to present something that effectively pays off the horrible concept. What's more, the film does a terrific job of making the viewer not want to see these monsters. Bullock's Mallory is forced to traverse the country and spend much of the movie blindfolded to avoid catching sight of the malevolent entities. The mood and Bullock's invested performance wash the film in a real sense of doom. Why take the risk of peeping at these beasts, even if they're fictional? Number 9. Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby stars Mia Farrow in the titular role. Rosemary Woodhouse and her husband Guy have taken an apartment in a building with a spooky reputation. And when they meet their new neighbours, elderly couple Minnie and Roman, things only seem more bizarre. The couple, Minnie especially, become involved in every aspect of the Woodhouses' lives, especially when Rosemary falls pregnant. The reason for their interference unfolds terrifyingly. It transpires that Rosemary is carrying the spawn of Satan, Guy selling out his wife for the perks that such a pledge entails. Polanski teases his audience cruelly at the finish, with Farrow career best in her reaction to the devil child in the crib. Her eyes bulge, she clutches her mouth, but we never get to see the abomination itself, and it's probably for the best. Number 7. It Follows. It's hard to precisely define the central evil at the heart of It Follows, and that uncertainty makes it all the more frightening. David Robert Mitchell's highly successful low-budget 2014 feature thrives on a great sense of foreboding, jump scares, and effective makeup, but the sheer unknowable and therefore unkillable nature of its monster is what lingers the most. An elevator pitch for the ages, It Follows is about a corporeal curse that can be transmitted only via sex. Sleep with the person carrying the curse and it's passed on to you. A figure follows you slowly but incessantly and you do not want to let it catch up. In It Follows, the figure takes all manner of shapes, from disheveled old women to hulking men and even replicas of the main characters, but we're never sure exactly what it really looks like. Number 6. The Haunting. Robert Wise's immensely influential and atmospheric 1963 horror seems to lay out its villains early on. In a voiceover, paranormally inclined scientist Dr. Markway gives a potted history of Hill House, the cruelty inflicted there by former owner Hugh Crane, and the tragic loss of life in its 90-year story. The Haunting is an incredibly effective exercise in mounting tension. We're expecting any minute now to see the ghosts in full flight, but we never do. Instead, fear is conjured through creaks, rattles, and a pervading mood of not quite rightness. Unlike the misfiring remake, Wise refuses to give any simple answers throughout the film, and his refusal to pay us off with a sight of ghostly villains or even confirm whether they even exist makes The Haunting far more scary. Number 5. The Moth Man Prophecies. A pacey and entertaining horror bolstered by a high-quality cast, The Moth Man Prophecies could be described as a creature doesn't feature. Starring Richard Gere and Laura Linney, Mark Pellington's 2002 film makes an ambitious and mostly successful attempt to tackle heavy themes of loss, obsession, and great big moth creatures. Gere plays John, whose wife dies early in the film as a result of a car crash. When he checks her belongings, he finds a notebook festooned with drawings of a huge red-eyed insect. A few years later, he finds himself in a small town where Linney's local cop Connie has been receiving reports and drawings of a similar creature. The meat of the film is in Gere's bereavement and desperation to remain close to his late wife by way of investigating the Mothman mystery. The source book of the same name is a more focused look at cryptozoology and local legend, but the film dips into something demonic. With sightings of the Mothman come inexplicable gaps in time and prophecies of doom. Number 4. Children of the Corn. While his sheer prolificness means Stephen King's stories aren't always top tier, he can consistently be counted on for a more interesting than average horror monster, and the enjoyable Children of the Corn is no exception. The 1984 adaptation of King's short story takes place in rural Nebraska. The town of Gatlin is highly reliant on the corn crop for its security, and so when one year the harvest fails, things get a bit weird. 11-year-old Isaac devises a quasi-religion based around the figure of He Who Walks Behind the Rows, an agricultural boogeyman, and soon leads a pre-adolescent uprising murdering all the adults in the town. We never quite catch sight of the creature, but its malevolent influence steers the children into rituals of sacrifice, bloodletting, and murder. The 1984 original spawned a surprising number of spin-offs in which the mythology of He Who Walks Behind the Rows was expanded and deepened. Some King fans have speculated that the creature is the devil or the true form of its Pennywise. Number 3. The Entity. A heavy-handed but powerfully focused allegory, The Entity is a film about abuse and trauma that remains highly effective 40 years after its release. Based on a woman's report of attacks by an invisible figure, it's a blunt but troubling movie with a terrific invested lead turn from Barbara Hershey. Hershey plays Carla, a young woman who is attacked in her home and sexually assaulted by an invisible force. She's of course traumatized by the experience, but worse still is the unwillingness of anyone around her to take her claims seriously. She's brushed off, passed around, and ignored. The film's efforts to deal with both the experience of abuse itself and the aftermath are commendable, and it's anchored brilliantly by Hershey, who keeps the supernatural tale grounded and relatable throughout. The Entity isn't an easy watch at all, but it uses the invisibility of its main threat to hammer home its key theme, which works remarkably well. Number 2. Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch not only tells a terrifying tale in a formally daring fashion, the premise is true malevolent genius. Using real TV presenters of the day, writer Stephen Volk and director Leslie Manning put on an early fake reality supernatural show. Talk show icon Michael Parkinson manned the phones in the studio while fellow presenters investigated a supposedly haunted house. As calls come in from viewers' experiences with the next world, we learn the tale of a spirit called Pipes, so called as he dwells in the property's plumbing. The tone gradually turns from light-hearted to chilling, culminating in the reveal that the TV broadcast is acting as an electronic seance with the spirit gaining strength. While the program was broadcast as part of a drama series, it was played so straight by all involved that it garnered 30,000 complaints and accusations of irresponsible misinterpretation as reality, all of which have massively inflated its reputation. Number 1. Cube. A smart, uncompromising survival horror that achieves an incredible amount on a budget of under $500,000, 1997's Cube would eventually undermine itself with increasingly misguided sequels and prequels that flattened and diluted the premise. The original film sees 6 disparate individuals stuck in a labyrinthine cube of unknown purpose. The place is dingy, mysterious, and worst of all, kitted out with lethal traps. The characters are forced to work together as they traverse the structure, figuring out which rooms will kill them and which are safe. While we learn a little about the cube's origins, as one of the prisoners was an engineer on the product, we never get the slightest clue as to who it was built for, what purpose it's supposed to serve, or most unnervingly of all, who would commission such a terrifying project. The later films dig a little deeper into the builders and the cube's history, but there's really no reason to do so. The faceless, endless nature of the cube itself is far more terrifying.